I never considered myself the jealous type. In fact, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you that I trusted my wife Amanda more than anyone in the world. We had been together for 9 years, married for 6, and in all that time, I never had a reason to doubt her. She was kind, intelligent, and dedicated to her work as a forensic technician at the city morgue. I admired her passion, even if her job made most people uncomfortable. But lately something felt off. It started with the late nights. Amanda had always worked irregular hours, but suddenly, she was staying later than usual, sometimes not coming home until sunrise. At first, she had excuses, a big case, a backlog of reports, a demanding supervisor. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Then came the secrecy. She started keeping her phone face down on the table. She changed her password, something she had never done before. She would get texts late at night, then step outside to answer them, claiming they were from work. The warmth in her voice, the way her lips curled ever so slightly when she read those messages. It wasn't how someone reacted to a work email. I tried to shake the feeling. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But then there was the smell. Amanda had always come home carrying the faint scent of chemicals, formaldehyde, disinfectants, whatever it was they used at the morgue. It wasn't pleasant, but I had grown used to it over the years. Lately, though, there was something different. Something metallic. Something rotten. One night, she came home and kissed me on the cheek, and I nearly gagged. I couldn't place it right away, but it reminded me of something primal, something instinctually wrong. Like the scent of meat left out too long in the heat. I asked her about it. She laughed, brushing it off. James, come on. I work in a morgue. What do you expect me to smell like? Roses. She had a point, but I had never noticed it before. Not like this. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was letting my imagination get the better of me. But deep down I knew something was very, very wrong, and I was going to find out what. The night my suspicion turned into certainty, I was alone in our bedroom, waiting for Amanda to come home. She had texted me earlier, saying she was stuck at work again, and not to wait up. I stared at my phone, reading the message over and over. I didn't believe her. My wife had always been dedicated to her job, but lately, it was like she lived at the morgue. And that smell, the rotten metallic scent, was getting worse every time she came home. I needed answers. I went downstairs to her office, a space I rarely entered. It was cluttered with case files, medical textbooks, and stacks of paperwork. But what caught my attention was her work bag, carelessly tossed onto the desk. Amanda never left it out like that. I hesitated. Snooping through her things felt wrong, but the gnawing doubt in my gut pushed me forward. I unzipped the bag and rifled through its contents. Pens, gloves, her ID badge, and then, tucked inside a side pocket, a burner phone. My heart started pounding. I turned it on, and a flood of unread messages appeared. The sender's name was saved as AB, initials that meant nothing to me. But the messages, they meant everything. Tonight, same place. Can't wait. You left marks on me last time. Be more careful. You're an addiction I'll never break. My hands clenched around the phone as my stomach twisted into knots. I wanted to scream, to smash the device against the wall, but I forced myself to stay calm. I scrolled further. Some messages contained locations, addresses I didn't recognize. One stood out, a place called Blackwell Crematorium. What the hell was my wife doing at a crematorium in the middle of the night? I had to know. I grabbed my keys, took a deep breath, and walked out the door. I drove in silence, my grip tightening around the wheel with every mile. The city lights faded behind me as I followed the GPS toward Blackwell Crematorium, a place I had never heard Amanda mention before. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was she meeting another man? Was she selling something under the table? Was it something even darker? The closer I got, the more I realized how isolated this place was. It wasn't in the heart of the city, where most funeral homes and morgues were. It was on the outskirts, tucked away behind an overgrown cemetery, the kind of place people forget about. I turned off my headlights as I approached. Amanda's car was already there, parked at the side of the building. The crematorium itself was old, brick walls covered in ivy, a single metal chimney reaching into the night sky. A few dim lights flickered inside, but the surrounding area was completely deserted. My pulse pounded in my ears as I sat there, watching. I didn't want to make a move too soon. If she was meeting someone, I needed to see it with my own eyes. Minutes passed. Then the side door creaked open. Amanda stepped outside, and she wasn't alone. A man followed behind her, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long black coat. Even from a distance, there was something about him that unsettled me. He walked with an air of control, of power, like he belonged in the shadows. They spoke in hushed tones. Amanda laughed. Not the awkward, nervous laugh she gave when covering up a lie, but something intimate.
Familiar.
Then, he reached out and ran a gloved hand down her arm. I saw red. I didn't know who he was, but I knew exactly what this meant. She wasn't working late. She wasn't overwhelmed by her job. She was meeting him, and I wasn't about to let this continue. I grabbed my phone, took a few pictures, and stepped out of my car. It was time to confront my wife. I stepped out of the car slowly, keeping to the shadows. The cool night air did nothing to ease the fire burning inside me. My pulse thundered in my ears as I approached, barely registering the crunch of gravel beneath my boots. Amanda and the man were still talking near the side door of the crematorium, unaware of my presence. I could hear faint murmurs, her voice soft, his deep and steady. He stood too close, his hand still resting on her arm. Then she did something that made my stomach turn. She tilted her head back and smiled at him. The same smile she used to give me when we first fell in love, when I was the center of her world. That smile now belonged to someone else. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Amanda! She froze. Her entire body tensed before she slowly turned to face me. For a second, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Guilt flickering across her face before she quickly masked it with forced composure. "James?" she said, her voice high and unnatural. "What are you doing here?" I stepped closer, ignoring the way the other man straightened his posture, his cold eyes assessing me. "That's my question," I said, my voice eerily calm. "What the hell are you doing here, Amanda?" She glanced at him, as if silently asking for guidance. That alone made my blood boil. I was just finishing up some work," she said quickly. "This is my colleague, Anton." I turned my gaze on him. He was taller than me, broader, with sharp features and an unsettling stillness about him. He didn't fidget, didn't react, just watched me with a slight, knowing smirk. I ignored the outstretched hand he offered. "Your colleague," I repeated, my eyes snapping back to Amanda. "Since when do your colleagues touch you like that?" She hesitated, just for a second, but that second was enough. "You're misunderstanding," she said, forcing a laugh. "Anton and I don't—" I cut her off. "Don't lie to me." Her mouth opened, then closed. The color drained from her face as she realized she was cornered. Anton finally spoke, his voice smooth and deep. "It seems your husband doesn't trust you, Amanda." My fists clenched. "That's because my wife has been sneaking off in the middle of the night to meet some stranger at a crematorium," I snapped. "So tell me, Anton, what exactly is she doing here?" He smiled. Not an apologetic smile. Not an awkward, caught-in-the-act smile. A smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Oh," he said, "you don't want to know." Amanda inhaled sharply, as if warning him not to say another word. But it was too late, because now I had to know. My entire body tensed at Anton's words. He didn't sound nervous or defensive. He sounded amused, like he knew something I didn't, like he was enjoying this. Amanda took a step forward, placing herself slightly between us. "James, you need to leave," she said quickly. This isn't what you think." I let out a humorless laugh. "Oh? Then explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, my wife has been sneaking off at night, lying to me and meeting some man at a crematorium. So please, Amanda, what exactly am I misunderstanding?" She didn't answer. Anton chuckled softly. He's persistent, he murmured, glancing at Amanda. I like that. I turned my full attention to him now, sizing him up. Who the hell are you? I asked coldly. And what do you have to do with my wife? He tilted his head slightly, studying me. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached into his coat pocket. I took a step back, instinctively preparing for the worst. But he didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a key. He held it between two fingers and extended it toward me, his smirk never faltering. If you're so desperate for answers, he said, why don't you come inside? Amanda's eyes widened in panic. No, she snapped, turning to him.
Anton, no.
His smirk grew. What's the matter? He murmured. Afraid he'll see? I had heard enough. I snatched the key from his fingers before Amanda could stop me. If there's something I need to see, I said, then I'm damn well going to see it. Amanda grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. James, don't. But I was already walking toward the door. And whatever was inside that building, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. Amanda's grip on my arm tightened as I pushed the key into the lock. I could feel her trembling, not with anger but with fear. James, please, she whispered. Don't do this. I ignored her. The lock clicked, and I shoved the heavy door open. A gust of stale, chemical-laced air hit me, thick with something else. Something sour. Something wrong. The crematorium was dimly lit, the fluorescent bulbs buzzing faintly above. The walls were lined with stainless steel trays, industrial ovens, and stacks of labeled body bags. The cold sterility of the room should have reassured me. Didn't, because amidst the expected sights of a crematorium, something felt off. Anton strolled in behind me, perfectly at ease, like he owned the place. He closed the door softly, as if sealing us in. Amanda was still behind me, breathing heavily. I turned to look at her. Now, I said, my voice low, tell me the truth. She hesitated. Then, for the first time since I caught her, she looked ashamed. Before she could answer, Anton moved toward a metal door on the far side of the room. He pulled it open, revealing a dark stairwell leading down. This is what you wanted, isn't it? He said, glancing back at me. Answers. My fingers twitched at my sides. I should have turned around. I should have dragged Amanda out of there and left. But I didn't, because some sick, twisted part of me needed to know. Without another word, I stepped forward and started down the stairs. Amanda let out a small, broken sound behind me. Anton followed, his footsteps slow and deliberate. The air grew colder the further we descended, the sharp scent of antiseptic giving way to something far worse. By the time we reached the bottom, I wasn't sure if I was breathing anymore. And then, I saw it. And nothing could have prepared me for what my wife had been hiding. The room at the bottom of the stairs wasn't like the sterile crematorium above. It was something else entirely. Dim, flickering lights cast long shadows over the cold stone walls. The air was thick, damp, carrying an unmistakable stench, one that sent my stomach twisting violently. It was the scent of decay, of something that should have been buried long ago. At the center of the room stood a large, black table, stainless steel with deep grooves along its surface. For drainage, for blood. Chains hung from the ceiling, some swaying gently as if recently disturbed. Along the far wall were shelves, not filled with tools of science or medicine, but with relics, bones, jars, strange, crumbling books with pages so stained they looked unreadable. A single slab lay at the far end of the room, and on it, a body, not in a bag, not prepared for cremation. This was fresh, recently dead. I stumbled back, slamming into Amanda. She let out a choked sob, clutching my sleeve. James, she whispered. I spun on her, my entire body shaking. What the hell is this? My voice echoed off the stone walls, swallowed by the room's oppressive stillness. She looked like she wanted to run, like she wanted to disappear. But Anton just smiled. Your wife, he said smoothly, has been quite dedicated to her work. Amanda's eyes snapped to him, rage flickering beneath her panic. "Shut up," she hissed. He ignored her. He stepped past me, walking toward the corpse on the slab. My pulse pounded as he slowly peeled back the white sheet covering it. And then I saw the worst part. The body wasn't just dead. It had been touched. There were bruises, fingerprints, lipstick stains. Amanda's lipstick. I stumbled back further, bile rising in my throat. My vision swam.
No, y whispered.
No, no, no. Amanda reached for me. "James, I swear. It's not what you think." I recoiled like she was poison. "Then what the hell is it, Amanda?" My voice cracked, my mind refusing to piece together the horror in front of me. Amanda's lips trembled. And then Anton spoke, his voice like silk over glass. "She belongs to me now." I turned to him slowly, my hands clenched into fists. And for the first time in my life, I felt the kind of rage that makes a man dangerous. My hands curled into fists so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. The walls of the underground chamber seemed to close in around me, trapping me in this twisted nightmare. My wife stood frozen, her eyes darting between me and Anton, her face pale, her lips parted like she wanted to explain, like there was anything in the world she could say to make this right. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at him. Anton leaned against the metal slab, completely at ease, as if the lifeless body beside him was nothing more than an afterthought. His sharp, calculating eyes studied me, drinking in my rage, my disgust. "She belongs to you?" My voice was low, eerily calm, but inside, my blood was boiling. "Explain that to me, Anton." His smirk widened. "Oh, James, don't act so shocked." He gestured toward Amanda with a lazy flick of his hand. "Did you really think she was just working late? That she was buried under paperwork? No, no. Your wife has been indulging in her real passion." Amanda made a strangled noise. "Stop talking." He ignored her. "She's been mine for a while now," Anton continued smoothly. "Her hands, her lips, her mind." His gaze flickered to me, his eyes glittering like a predator who had cornered his prey. "But you weren't supposed to find out." Something inside me snapped. I lunged at him. Faster than I thought possible, Anton moved. 1 second, I was swinging for his smug face, and the next, I was slammed against the cold stone wall, his grip like iron around my throat. Amanda screamed. "Anton, stop." He didn't even look at her. He just leaned in, his breath cold against my skin. "You should have stayed ignorant," he murmured. "You should have stayed blind." His grip tightened, just enough to make my vision blur at the edges. Then he let go. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. Amanda rushed to me, but I shoved her away. "Don't," I rasped. "Don't touch me." She flinched. Anton crouched beside me, his head tilting slightly. "You're an obstacle now, James," he said casually. "And obstacles need to be removed." I stared up at him, my breath heavy, my body shaking. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't leaving this room alive. Not unless I changed the game. So I swallowed my rage. I steadied my voice. And I said the last thing either of them expected. "Teach me." Anton's brow lifted. Amanda made a choked sound. "What?" she breathed. I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring the way my stomach churned at what I was about to do. "You said I was blind." I forced my face into something neutral, something unreadable. Then opened my eyes. Anton studied me for a long moment. Then, ever so slightly, his lips curled into a grin. "Now that is interesting." Amanda's face twisted in horror.
James, no.
I ignored her. I kept my eyes locked on Anton, standing my ground, willing my hands not to shake. Every instinct inside me screamed that I was walking into a trap, that I should run, fight, do anything but what I had just said. But I knew one thing for certain. If I wanted to destroy this man, to take back control, I had to make him believe I wanted to understand him. I had to become the monster before I could kill it. Anton studied me, amusement flickering in his sharp eyes. "You surprise me, James." he murmured, circling me like a predator testing its prey. Most men in your position would be crying, screaming, threatening vengeance. But you, he smirked. You want to learn? I forced myself to nod. You say I was blind. Then make me see. Amanda grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. James, please, you don't have to do this. I turned to her slowly, leveling my gaze at the woman I once thought I knew. And you did. She recoiled like I had slapped her. Anton chuckled. He has a point. I turned back to him, jaw clenched. Show me. Anton tilted his head, considering me. Then, slowly, he stepped aside and gestured toward the corpse. Then let's begin. Amanda let out a broken sob. James, don't. But I was already stepping forward. The body lay motionless on the steel slab, its pale skin marred by bruises, by her hands. I swallowed back the bile rising in my throat, forcing myself to appear unaffected. Anton leaned against the table, watching me. Tell me, James, how does it feel? I exhaled through my nose, staring at the lifeless form. Cold, silent, defiled. Like power, I said. Anton's eyes flashed with something dark. Approval. Amanda let out a quiet gasp, but I didn't dare look at her. Not now. Anton's smile widened. Good. He reached into a nearby drawer, pulling out a scalpel. He flipped it in his fingers before offering it to me. Then prove it. I stared at the blade, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I had expected words, manipulation, maybe even some twisted test of loyalty. But this was a line I wasn't ready to cross. I felt Amanda's gaze burning into me, silently pleading, begging. Anton simply waited, his patience infinite. I reached for the scalpel, and in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about proving myself to Anton. This was the beginning of my revenge. The scalpel felt heavier than I expected. This cold handle pressed into my palm, a tool designed for precision, for control. I stared at it, knowing that with one wrong move, everything could collapse. Anton watched me, his smirk lingering, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp, testing me. Amanda stood frozen, her breathing shallow. She had begged me to stop before. Now she said nothing, because she was realizing what I wanted Anton to believe, that I was becoming like him. Go on, Anton murmured. Make your first mark. I swallowed. My stomach twisted at the thought of touching the body in front of me, of playing into this sick game. But I knew I had no choice. I had to sell this. With a steady hand, I pressed the blade against the corpse's arm, just above the wrist. The flesh gave way easily, too easily. A thin red line appeared, deepening as I dragged the scalpel just slightly. Not enough to show enthusiasm. Not enough to seem weak. Just enough. Anton exhaled softly, like a teacher watching a promising student. You learn fast. I forced a small, cold smile. I adapt. Amanda let out a strangled noise behind me. James, she whispered, barely audible. I ignored her. Anton grinned. I think I'm going to like you. I turned to him, my grip tightening on the scalpel. Not for long, because now I had earned his trust, and soon I was going to end him. Anton's eyes gleamed with approval. I had done just enough, shown just enough to convince him. He thought I was breaking, transforming. But I wasn't. I was calculating. I wiped the scalpel clean with a cloth Anton handed me, my movements controlled, my face unreadable. Inside, I was screaming, but I couldn't afford to slip now. Amanda looked at me like she didn't recognize me, like she was watching me turn into something worse than Anton. Good. She deserved to feel that fear. Anton clapped a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. You're full of surprises, James. I forced a smirk. Like I said, I adapt. He chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. That's what I like to hear. He turned, strolling toward a set of metal cabinets along the far wall. We have much more to explore. But first, let's have a drink, shall we? I exhaled slowly, willing my pulse to slow. A drink meant time, a chance to gather information, to push deeper into his world, until I found the perfect way to tear it apart. Amanda was still staring at me, her hands trembling. "James," she whispered. "We need to go. Now." I turned to her, expression cold. "We're already in, Amanda." I let my voice drop lower, just for her. "Now we finish this." She swallowed hard. She wanted to run. I could see it. But I wasn't going to let her escape the nightmare she had built. Anton pulled out an old bottle, something dark and expensive looking. He poured 2 glasses, handing one to me. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his. "To trust." I took a slow sip, keeping my face neutral. The alcohol burned down my throat, but nothing burned as much as the rage simmering beneath my skin. I had him right where I wanted him, and soon I would make sure he never walked out of this place alive. The whiskey burned, but I barely noticed. My focus was on Anton, how he moved, how he spoke, how comfortable he was in his little kingdom of death. He thought he had won. He leaned back against the cold steel table, sipping his drink. "You know, James, I didn't expect you to take to this so easily." I smirked. "Neither did I." Amanda's breath hitched beside me. She still didn't understand. She thought I was becoming like him. No, I was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Anton poured another drink, his guard lowering. He thought he had me under his spell. "Trust is rare," he mused. "But I see it in you, James." I forced a smirk. "Glad to hear it." His arrogance made him sloppy. He turned his back, reaching for something on the shelf. That was his mistake. I gripped the scalpel I had never set down, and I lunged. The scalpel sank deep into Anton's side. He gasped, eyes widening in shock. For the first time, he was the one caught off guard. I twisted the blade. "Trust is rare," I murmured. "And you just gave it to the wrong man." Amanda screamed. Anton staggered, blood spilling between his fingers. But he wasn't dead. Not yet. Anton snarled, trying to grab me, but I was faster. I yanked the scalpel out and drove it into his throat. A wet, choking sound escaped him. His hands trembled, reaching for me, then dropped. He collapsed against the metal table, blood pooling beneath him. Amanda stood frozen, eyes wide with horror.
James.
I turned to her, breathing hard. "We're not done," I said coldly, because now it was her turn to pay.